Focusing just on cost efficiency is a huge missed opportunity. It is like one of those immediate gratification things, but is it going to bring long-term value? If people only focus on how much can you save using this stuff, you are missing out on an entire world.
How can we get faster and how can we make it cheaper? But really, that's never been an emphasis on quality. We've just been emphasizing speed and kind of cost reduction. So the conversation is starting to shift away from how do we use AI to maximize speed and efficiency to how do we use AI to do things we've never done before.
Welcome back to another episode of the MM+M podcast. I'm Lesha Bushak, pharma editor at MM+M. Here with me today is Jen Batey, EVP of Integrated Strategy at GSW, powered by Syneos Health, and Bryan Roman, EVP, Experience Director of GSW, powered by Syneos Health. We're going to talk about South by Southwest 2026 and some of the biggest takeaways for healthcare marketers. We'll unpack the biggest themes that came out of Austin this year, from the evolving role of AI and immersive brand experiences to the growing importance of trust, community, and creator-driven influence. Jen and Bryan, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I didn't get the chance to be at South by Southwest this year, but our managing editor, Jack O'Brien, was, and he was reporting from the ground there. But I'd love to hear it directly from you. So what were your overall impressions of South by Southwest this year? And was there anything that really stood out to you?
You know, I think every year we go and we see a lot of different things. We go with different people, but often enough, there's like a unifying theme that everybody kind of agrees upon. This year, definitely AI, AI everywhere in every single conversation, almost like nauseatingly so, whether we love it or we hate it or anything in between. I will say that it's gone from being a lot of theory and people talking about what can be done to people talking about like what they are doing. So I think that was really fascinating. Across the industry, people talking about workflow and process and like what tools they're using and why they're using it versus like a lot of loftier talk about what it can be. And with that, I think has come the realization that it's a scary technology. People are worried about the disruption and what that means in its various forms. And I think because of that, there was way more focus on the human connection and community and what does it mean about us at a certain point. Like, that's great. We can automate the entire universe, but aren't we doing that for us as people? And so I think it's a lot of the conversations kind of wove themselves around those two topics.
I agree. I think it felt like it moved from pure excitement about the technology to a much more balanced conversation around how we use the technology to design for people and really creating that connectivity. And also a little bit of downside of using these tools and relying on them so heavily and kind of the implications to our capability strengthening, like curiosity and creative problem solving and things like that. So kind of more of that balance of, hey, AI is great and we can use it for a number of wonderful things, but there comes with it some side effects that we need to be mindful of.
And South by Southwest is typically like a cultural and technology barometer every year. What were the biggest signals that you saw there this year that health and pharma marketers should really be paying attention to?
I think really for us, it was that AI is really leveling the playing field on production already. So whether that's content, messaging, or even personalization. So the question becomes, if we all have the same tools, what are we doing to make our brands and the experiences we're creating unique? The answer that we kept seeing to that is really making them much more human-centric. And I feel like everyone says that, but it's really more about a very deep, genuine understanding of patients and their care teams and translating that into clearer thinking, stronger storytelling, and really more authentic connection opportunities. And with that also comes a trust layer. So as AI generated content kind of becomes more and more prolific, we have a lot of work cut out for us to discern fact from fiction. And the brands that will win are the ones that show up more consistently in the same kind of expected channels and some unexpected ways, but just being that consistent presence and having that very strong brand strategy and message approach that helps to develop that trust along the way.
Yeah. And it's been, I just feel like it's so broad of a topic now. It's like talking about like computers or cooking or what, it's like stuff that's part of our lives. It is in every aspect of what we do as professionals. So I think when we say AI, it means a lot of different things. I think it could mean creating content. I think it could be creating tools or like workflows. And when we say create, is it like massaging and manipulating data? Is it doing something that's more like on the aesthetic, where we're talking about kind of designing a campaign, like a visual design, copywriting, video? It's really every aspect of our craft is impacted by it. And I think like we could talk for the rest of this conversation about the nuance of where it may be more impactful, where it still needs to be worked on, et cetera. But I think the idea that, like Jen said, the leveling aspect of it is incredibly important. And it's good for marketers on the pharma side. It's good for folks on the agency side to realize that like it's all going to normalize. Every time there's like a spike in a new platform or somebody gets a proprietary this or a proprietary that, whatever the tool might be, the next big model that comes out, whether it's 6 months from now, next year, the next GPT or the next version of Claude, there's a high likelihood that if somebody has already created something that is incredibly useful and it's available online and it's built off of their technology or in part because of it, the next big model is just going to take that, it's going to gulp it up, and now everybody's going to have access to it. So then what does that mean when it's leveled? Like, in other words, it's almost a good thing in my mind, because for us and my colleagues, my team, Jen, the agency, it's talented people. It's folks with ideas, and they're curious and they're inspired. And I think that's what our clients want, is at the end of the day to bring ideas and concepts and strategies to the table that are going to move the needle for our clients' brands. Like, at the end of the day, it's about business. It's about moving the needle, whatever the metric might be. There's a lot of emphasis on finding the tool or the platform or like the tech that's going to be like the thing for the next handful of years. And it's like, throw that idea out the door. The only thing that's going to be constant is disruption, and the fact that we are going to have to strive more and more to be creative and to be compelling in our communications.
And you mentioned AI, and obviously it's a pretty dominant theme, not just at South by Southwest, but like any conference that you would go to in the space. One can argue it's probably in every panel in some way or another. You said it was like a nauseating level of AI to an extent. Did the dialogue feel different this year, though, than in years past? Because I feel like we've had a little bit of an evolution. In the first couple of years, it was about experimenting with AI. It was a buzzword, trying to figure out what it was, what's the hype around it. And now I feel like most companies have integrated AI to some extent, and now they're really finding out what works and what doesn't. Was the dialogue different this year, and what did you kind of take away from it?
I think for me, it definitely felt a lot more grounded this year. It was less about the hype and more about nuance, and really finding that balance between skepticism and optimism. I think there's still excitement about what AI can do, but there's a growing awareness, like I said, of all the trade-offs around creativity, thinking, and how people work every day. And one of the things that came up a lot is that the focus with AI, generative, we've been talking a lot about generative, and it's not just generative, but the focus has been on efficiencies. What are the efficiencies that we're gaining? How can we get faster, and how can we make it cheaper? But really, that's never been an emphasis on quality. We've just been emphasizing speed and kind of cost reduction. So the conversation is starting to shift away from how do we use AI to maximize speed and efficiency to how do we use AI to do things we've never done before. And I think that that's really a cool space to be. There were a lot of sessions about vibe coding. And for me as a strategist, I'm not out there vibe coding, but I took a vibe coding workshop and it was very accessible and made it easy for me to take an idea or a kernel of an idea and make me very dangerous for when I go back to Bryan's team and say, hey, I built this thing over the weekend. So all of these tools are really kind of leveling the playing field and making all of the platforms really accessible, but they're also really kind of expanding what's possible, which is super exciting.
I think that focusing just on cost efficiency is a huge missed opportunity. It is like one of those like immediate gratification things, but is it like going to bring long-term value? And, if anything, if you cut too deep, and that's within an agency, that's from a brand, it's just in general. Like if people only focus on how much can you save using this stuff, you are missing out on an entire world that is going to cut. Basically, the seeds are being planted now. And to me, I think back in the .com era, I think about like Web 2.0, mid 2000s, advent of mobile devices, social media. Every one of those times, the people that were the early adopters or the companies that embraced the technology first were the ones that got the edge, especially from a marketing perspective. And so I liken it to use a stupid analogy, but it's like, I think maybe before the past couple of years, let's say since Claude Code and OpenAI's Codex came out. Right. Those are applications that build. They're builders. It's slightly different than say like a Chat GPT or the regular Claude. It really doesn't matter anymore if you're a dev or not. It designs for you. It does a number of things that go way beyond say what people might think a programmer or a coder would do. But prior to that, it's like saying when I want to cook for dinner tonight, I have to go collect all my firewood and then make a fire pit and then whatever, find the stuff I'm going to eat. And then I can actually start cooking. And we're now entering an era where it's kind of like, well, we have none of us have that. We all have ovens and stoves in our kitchens and you can cook whenever you want. So when the labor or when the effort goes from like having to like rummage for firewood or spend all this time not actually cooking. And what you could do is you could cook all day if you wanted to. And then new things arise out of that, right? I mean, ages ago, like you have chefs, you have people, we have restaurants all over the place. There are things that come with the advent of a new technology that you can't predict. And the best thing to do is to just embrace it. And it's interesting right now because in the industry, there is I would say a contrast between cut costs or find optimization versus that like idea of like finding the new thing. What might be the net new channel or the net new concept, the thing that gives you the edge against all your competition and makes you stand out in the market. That is where I think that the huge opportunities are.
I'm curious, were there any like AI solutions at South by Southwest or anything, any use of AI that you saw that really stood out to you that kind of captured that, developing that long-term value that you mentioned beyond just the cutting costs?
I think for me, one of the interesting ones, I saw Ian B. Kraft, he runs a consultancy or agency called Signal and Cypher. And, he came out 2 South bys ago. This is like before Claude Code, all that stuff. And he was talking about the $1 billion agency of one, right? And, meaning like in the future, there's going to be a company or a group of people, real small group of people that are going to have $1 billion valuation and sell. And so that's happened already. It's partly because of some of these tools out there. I forget in our industry, there was somebody that was just picked up by a large pharmaceutical organization, basically buying his intellectual property or their intellectual property. And then another one that just happened was the individual who created OpenClaw. And so for those that just in a nutshell, OpenClaw is a framework that you can use and you can basically install it on your computer and have it run everything. It'll run your texts. It'll run email. It'll do your Excel sheets. It'll design things for you. It'll do pretty much whatever you instruct it and you teach it to do. And it's a pretty clever use of all the different technologies. It's not perfect, but it's a great idea. And it's, to me, those kind of things that have been coming out, because I don't know if South by is necessarily going to be the place where they introduce the brand new late breaking agentic process. What they're going to do is they're going to talk about the importance. And then when you start to get that almost confirmation bias from the market, that stuff like OpenClaw, that these builder tools can really do way more than just build apps and build banner ads and websites and stuff. That gets very exciting. So 2 years later, Ian Beecraft predicted it, that the guy that started up OpenAI bought his company, meaning like AKA they bought him and his intellectual property. And I think it was like roughly a $1 billion agreement, which is just insane to think about. So to me, it's like you look at the amount of money that's getting thrown at this stuff. You look at the way that we have clear examples of agentic workflow, where I think a couple of years ago it was theory, right? A couple of years ago it was like you have ChatGPT and you do a few things and it kind of gives you some advice, and then you have to go on your own, go build an app or go do your research and then kind of make the database. All these systems are talking to each other now, right? Claude can talk to Figma, can talk to whatever the newest one is, Paper.design, can talk to any number of like, DevOps platform, can talk to our internal, like Snowflake environment and, like kind of tap into, say, an enterprise's, vast array of knowledge and data that they have. So, sorry, long-winded way of saying, I think the stuff that really stood out was proving that the agentic models work, that you can do things from, basically, generate an entire ad campaign if you wanted to from scratch. I don't know how good it would be. It was just all done by the robot, to doing something as simple as like, checking your email and then responding to, your boss or your loved ones while you're busy, and having it basically just have you like do check marks of like, do I approve this message? Do I decline that message? And it kind of just knows how you think. So it's often enough going to say the right things.
Yeah, agentic AI is the thing that I've been hearing a lot recently in 2026. I think that's like the next big thing. Were there any other activations or panels or brand experiences that you saw at South by Southwest? It could even be anything outside of healthcare, because our listeners are always interested in takeaways from those things as well. But anything else that you saw there that really raised the bar for how health brands can show up?
I think for me, I didn't see a lot of healthcare activations this year, which I thought was really interesting. What stood out, though, is really not a single activation, but rather more of a pattern about the activations. They were not high tech. They were instead very immersive. They were designed to create participation moments, surprise, or even a bit of friction or creative problem solving, where you had to engage, you had to think, and then more importantly, you got to feel something. And those were the ones that people really remembered and they talked about. I know Bryan and I were talking about Netflix had a Peaky Blinders activation. That was so well done. We all talked about it for days, where they created basically a Peaky Blinders bar, where outside you could get a haircut. In the back, you could get actual tattoos, like real tattoos. And you could go to the bar, you can get a whiskey and get your Peaky Blinders hat. And it was all very, very immersive. People were lined up all day long trying to get into these activations because they were just so all encompassing, and they really triggered a bunch of emotions for you about the brands. And I think that's the takeaway that we can have for healthcare brands as well, is we're in a regulated environment. We're not going to be able to create a bar that's a very immersive experience necessarily, but we can create emotions. We can create these opportunities for people to engage in a tactile way with our brands. And I think that's what we need to remember, is that it doesn't necessarily always have to be a high-tech moment. It can just be a really human moment. And that, I think, is something that would be meaningful.
That contrast between like just AI everywhere, like I said, almost it's not nauseating, but yeah, you're just like, even I'm like the biggest nerd there is. Jen and I both, but like we love all this stuff, but sometimes it's just like there's more to it than that. Everybody's like got to get off the train of like, oh, here's the tool and here's the product. We say, okay, here's a workflow. Here's how we can make it work for ourselves. And then just go back to being people. And I think folks are finally like, kind of almost like hit the limit of how much of this constant disruption and change. And it's all tech, that is like pretending to be people. I think people they're lining up for the Rivian. That's another one. The electric car maker, they had a great one where it was basically just, go off-roading, right? And it was super fun. It was a big party. People were dancing. Peaky Blinders. There was a clear desire for human connection while we were out there. everybody chatting, everybody talking, probably more than ever. And I'm just like, maybe it's, because the couple of years in the past, I don't know if it was because of COVID and social distancing or, all of those things we don't all want to like think about anymore. But it definitely like kind of muted, I think, our collective experience for a while. And that's what I think we all saw at South by was a real desire for human connection, and for experiences. So I think that's just awesome combination for people like us, because it's a good portion of what we do.
And even the smaller ones were also very interesting. Like the PBS had a very small, you could almost barely find it activation. And it was just, you came in and you got your photo taken in front of the PBS logo. It was a Polaroid, just a really small one. And then you could they asked you to write what your favorite PBS show was and then hang it up on a wall. And that little hint of nostalgia, along with everyone else writing about what they loved about PBS, was such a powerful way to really speak about the brand, because it's not one that you might think about all the time, but it's one that certainly, I think, needs a little love and attention right now. And the way that they brought that activation to life was not expensive, but it was very meaningful and very powerful.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love PBS. But yeah, I think like what you're both talking about with all of this new advent of AI and kind of paired with this need for human connection, like people are craving the human connection, the face-to-face interactions, even as AI is evolving so rapidly. And I think that's always going to be a really important thing that brands need to keep in mind. Last year, trust, community, and the creator economy were major themes. Did you see an evolution in how brands are building their relationships with audience this year?
All of those themes have really intensified, kind of to the points that we've been making so far. It's really about that connection, and relationship building is not easy. So I think what we're seeing is that building connection and building trust, in light of the fact that you can create content with speed, it really does start to make us be more thoughtful about the approach that we take to developing that content. And it's much more about how we activate against that content as well, so that we are doing it consistently and credibly, and that it feels like it's coming from the same tone, and that it feels real and accessible and inspired and even surprising, kind of in the best way. And I think that means that you can't just rely on messaging alone anymore, because content is very, very easy to generate. I think it really has to be done through the actions and the experiences that you create. And those have to be rooted in human insight more than ever, because right now I think it's just so easy to find content at scale and to point out where you can tell that something was generated by AI. It seems easier than ever because they're all using the same language. If it's got the word rhythm in it, if it's a piece of content that has an M dash, I'm immediately skeptical. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Did AI write this? This sounds like ChatGPT. So I think there is a lot more of an onus on us as creatives and our clients to make sure that whatever content that we're building is, again, based on humans and based on what we know of people, and clearly communicating in a way that seems transparent and consistent and true to what we know about those people.
Yeah. I'll just say I'd say those trends continue, because those are, I think, are very common industry trends. And obviously those are, channels and tactics that we always, go after. But the amount of slop out there is crazy. Everybody talked about it. Everybody's sick of it. It's to the almost to the point where it's been memeified. So there might be something that a weird kind of sub trend that comes out of that, where all of a sudden slop in and of itself is like an aesthetic that maybe can speak to younger audiences. Yeah. I think there's actually a huge trend online of like taking kind of really terribly generated AI characters and kind of memifying it. You say with the big orange cat. Yeah. And that's kind of what Sora, I think what Sam Altman was trying to do with Sora was make a little bit of a social network and video sharing app out of kind of doing that. However, I do think that when you're trying to speak to a customer or you're trying to communicate as a brand, it's more important than ever to balance that need to do it cheaper or to do it faster or even more volume, but to do it well. So I think quality is more important than ever.
I totally agree. And I even heard someone say that this was wild speculation, of course, that we were maybe only 1 to 2 years away from not having influencers anymore because of the speed with which content could be developed. And, you have AI avatars and people that look real. So TBD, whether or not that's a thing that we'll have to contend with moving forward. But it was an interesting and provocative point of view for sure.
And you've both learned a lot this year at South by Southwest. So how are you planning on taking all the insights and everything we just talked about and implementing them into action, whether that's with your internal teams or your clients or future campaigns?
Yeah, I'd say, I think it's confirmed a lot of our biases, that's a word, that we're thinking about it the right way, which is awesome. I think getting that almost like confirmation from seeing kind of industry leaders speak in sessions and give keynotes and basically say stuff that Jen and I say all the time. It's like, okay, cool. We're moving in the right direction. And I think that gives us some ammo to, continue getting on our soapboxes and talking about almost like more boring things like best practices, building standards that happen way up front in the process. And if we did want to talk a little bit about real things and workflow, the briefing process, kicking off projects, whatever that may be, whatever point during a project it may be, it's going to be more and more important to be super concise and as descriptive as possible with how you brief things. So I think a lot of us are, familiar with prompting, right? You get the better your prompt, usually the better response you're going to get from, say, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. But there's also ways to provide it with larger amount of context, which are almost like requirements documents or almost the brief itself. So I do think we're going to start to see kind of the brief and almost like these like mega prompts that we use to kind of prime a system to then build for us or to create for us. You're going to start seeing that come together. And in order for that to happen, teams really need to focus on being as organized as possible up front and really spell out what it is we want to accomplish. So I don't think it takes necessarily more work. The beauty is we can create templates. We can create all these systems that will kind of replicate that, right? Through a custom GPT or, pick whatever kind of automation you want. You leverage the agents to help you and help us kind of move along in that process. I think we do that. I think companies that do that and teams that do that will reap the benefits of that later on in the year.
I totally agree. And I think from my standpoint, with AI, it's really easy to jump straight into execution, to use it to generate ideas, to draft messages, create content, all of that. But what we heard repeatedly is the real value is in the thinking upfront, which I think that we do a lot of. We're very concerted in that effort, but it just reinforced the need for it even more. So really talking to each other, are we solving the right problem? To go back to Brian's point about the briefing process, making sure that we have the right understanding. Do we deeply understand the audience? Are we bringing in a distinct point of view? And then when we get to ideation, are we using some of the creative best practices that we have available to us that aren't necessarily ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever it is, but instead we have Lego as a Lego Serious Play as a problem solving tool and a creative ideation tool. We can use our hands. We can do the things that we used to do in an analog environment and then put them into an AI environment to really take them from good and to even better. So really trying to reinforce that with our teams, that it's okay to start analog and it's actually better if you do. And really leveraging the front end thinking, the collaborating within teams and not replacing those really powerful moments of pulling people together.
Yep. And just to clarify, because I feel like a lot of the account folks, if they are listening and they hear it's like more briefs all the time, that could be very controversial at times. What Jen said is a great way to help illustrate that. It's more about planning. So is it a brief? Is it a kickoff? Is it like just a simple thing that you start off the whole team being aware of what's happening? And I do think that planning phase, it works best when there is a discussion that happens. It's more collaborative. I think the beauty of a lot of these tools are they're bringing us closer together in these key moments. And so it's like, just take advantage of that. And I think if we do, then it's like, okay, well, as we know, the tech is going to evolve and it's going to become more like just prevalent in everything we do, then all of a sudden now we're organized. And so I think but I love that idea of pairing it with the analog as well. Because you almost need to have that conversation before you even kick something off.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And if you were to distill all of this into one clear message for specifically a pharma chief marketing officer, because I know a lot of our listeners are usually in the pharma space. So if you were to give them one clear message from South by Southwest, what would it be?
I think right now, strategy cannot be an annual process. I think too much is changing around us. I think the way that we've been thinking about strategic foresight, using signals and convergences, has been more with an eye on the future and how we can prepare more for whatever may come. And I think we heard that a lot as one of the core themes, is that it's no longer enough to think about just tomorrow. You need to be thinking about what's ahead for the next 5 to 10 years based on where the technology is going. And since nobody knows, and certainly nobody knows where the regulatory environment is going, it's really about protecting space for thinking and being strategic at multiple spots throughout the year, using scenario planning and different tools that we have available around that to just make sure that we are thinking about the what ifs in the right way. And really strengthening the capabilities across the organization. So whether that be within the agency here or within the client's environment, around critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, all of those are going to matter more than just understanding the next AI tool.
Yep. Process and workflow are paramount. And part of that workflow or part of like the process is just building a habit of adapting to change, because everything right now is an approximation. Even the people that are like the leaders in the industry know that. And that's what they've done. What they've done is they built a process around that. They've been able to agentify all kinds of things, knowing that, 5 months from now, there may be totally different platforms that people need to use. So it's like, don't focus on the tool, focus on figuring out how to be flexible and partnering with people who have a bit of a mental elasticity. They're good at what they do. They have ideas. They're curious. And I think within their organizations, when people are talking about this stuff, it's like, look for the leaders and not the followers, because those are the moments when you're going to be able to capitalize on these moments. And this is like one of these things that happen once in a generation. And it's happening now. The agentification of everything, the constantly changing technology requires a flexible mindset and an ability to just adapt to change. Super important.
Jen and Bryan, thank you so much for joining and for breaking down the biggest themes from South by Southwest this year. There's a lot to take in and think about. Really enjoyed our conversation, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.